of a given number, when added to itself, is greater than the initial number squared. For that would expose a loose thread within the fabric of our understanding, a loose thread capable of unraveling the very ground rules of mathematics. That's a bold statement. So then I just say, this opening thesis is false. There are plenty of examples of this that have escaped your attention. His statement is shown to be false for every number that's less than 1 and greater than 0. For example, the square root of 0.64 is 0.8. 0.8 is bigger than 0.64, and it's a larger number than the original. And 0.64 squared equals 0.4096, a smaller number than the original. To the extent that the next 35 pages depends on your stated thesis, this fact undermines your claims and assumptions and conclusions. It's not about feelings here. It's about objective reality. So at the time, I considered Terrence a strong acquaintance, and we hung out a bit and had much exchange. We haven't spoken much since then. But go to page 2, and in here, he mentions people who he declares were persecuted because their vision exceeded the myopic view of their contemporaries. And he mentions Walter Russell, Nikola Tesla, John Keeley, and many, many more. Regarding your list of people who have made brave sacrifices, I note that to be a genius is to be misunderstood, but to be misunderstood is not to be a genius. The work of Russell, Walter Russell, has eluded any experimental support, and the work of Keeley is generally not reproducible. Science is about reproducibility. I can have the most brilliant, crazy, fun idea ever, and if I perform an experiment and no one else can duplicate that experiment, it belongs in the trash heap. It's me.
There we go. That is Neil deGrasse Tyson in his reply to Terrence Howard, because Terrence Howard appeared on the JRE, talked about Neil deGrasse Tyson, how he attacked him, how he was very disparaging, dismissive. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson came with receipts and showed him it was not about feelings, it was about facts. And on most of what you said, you were wrong. Terrence Howard is back on the JRE alongside of a real mathematics physicist. I believe that is Eric Weinstein's title. He is there with Eric, and it's not a debate. It's pretty much Eric trying to understand what Terrence is talking about so he can actually give him a fair shake and actually examine and steelman what Terrence is actually coming to him with. Very interesting conversation. But in this clip I'm about to show you, Terrence comes at Neil deGrasse Tyson once again. Very interesting conversation because Eric Weinstein tries to stop it. Joe Rogan doesn't know why he's trying to stop it. Terrence wants to keep going. This whole thing ensues. Very interesting stuff. Let's get to that clip immediately. Let's go, folks.
The spectrum of Terrence, from the best to the worst, is a broad spectrum. And he seriously wants to improve what he's doing. He cares about it. And if I can play a part in that, I think
I want to offer to you, I want to be able to show you the things that I tried to show Neil deGrasse Tyson that he would not even really take a look at and to see.
But no, he did take a look at it, right? He responded in a long video recently.
Yeah, but his response was disingenuous.
Guys, may I make a recommendation? Let's start with the ideas, because I think we all care about those.
Yes, for sure. But hold please, because this is an important thing that just came out.
He was so disingenuous because I sent him a long email after he sent me back the red line thing, thanking him for reviewing it and saying, look forward to when we can discuss these things, because I sent the treatise to him so we could discuss that on the show. His whole point was, I'm going to bring you on my show and we're going to talk. So here's the stuff that we're going to talk about that I would like to talk about. He never followed up from that point forward, just sent one-line emails. Any other thing you got to go to somebody else. So he's pretended like, oh, I was trying to be, very helpful, but that's not what the email trails show.
So he did make this one very large response, though, right? He did. He did go over the treatise, all the red line stuff. He only has so much time. He might be in a position to defend him, but he might be in a position where he's like, look, I just said what I said about all this stuff. Good luck. I don't have the time to like sit here and discuss these things in depth.
And
Maybe
that's great.
possible. Maybe
That's great. But it's like you invited me to come and do your show. I put this stuff together to come and talk to you on your show, and then there's no follow up with the show.
Got it.
So where's the beer?
I understand it. I mean, I understand your perspective for sure.
It's like, come on, man. If
Yeah,
you're
he might
gonna
have got to
do
a
it.
point where it's like a thing where he thinks it's ridiculous and he doesn't want to engage it on
And
his show.
ridiculous. Amen. And I believe that, but if you got 97, 98 patents and 4 supersymmetrical systems that you're claiming you have, and all you need is someone to
I'm gonna have
review
to jump
them,
in, and I don't want to do it this
that'd
way.
be great.
Listen, we're just having a conversation.
This isn't about
because
Tyson.
What's the
this is
problem?
this is a colleague of mine.
Yeah, this isn't about
And
Tyson, and I love
the-
him. I love him. I grew up watching him, and I appreciated
But
him.
what is the problem? We're defending him. I certainly am.
Because Neil's a complicated guy, and part of what's going on is that there's a problem in general, which we scientists do not behave honestly with respect to certain things. We'll make these claims about science is about communication and challenging ideas and all these things, and everybody can be a scientist, and all these sorts of things that we say. Science is interesting, science is fun. Well, very often it's not interesting, very often it's not fun. Very often you can't really say that everybody can do science because it's super demanding. We don't welcome people, you're a mathematician too. We'll say that to kids, and then the kid will say something, and then we'll say, be quiet.
Yeah.
And so this is not peculiar to Neil. It's like science in general has portrayed itself as a place where everyone's welcome. We debate out the ideas. We have the scientific method to tell us what's true and what isn't. And that's disingenuous. It's not really how the game works. And this is going to involve peer review. It's going to involve people who are dual in terms of both doing research and being public figures. People who are public figures who we think of as researchers who aren't really doing much research. People who are, pushing crazy agendas in public without a recognition that their colleagues don't think much of what they're doing. I mean, this is a very complicated story that Terrence has walked into. And I have to think about my colleagues, and I have to think about how they hear things, what they will say. And so I am in part speaking to your audience, but I'm also partially speaking to 1,000 people who are seeing this at a different level.
But just for the record, like
Sure.
I said, I grew up watching Neil and having someone that was light-skinned, that looked like me, up there making these grand steps towards helping people to understand. I admire him, and I still would like the opportunity to sit down and show him these things and have that beer, because I think that he will be pleased once he sees the supersymmetry associated with it and understand where all of the passion came from. And I hope that other scientists will take a look at it, but that's the whole point of us doing this.
I don't know how serious he is about that beer.
No.
Right? Because I saw him say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, that was a very complicated thing that he did. And it had many layers as to whether or not you took it on the surface, you took the hidden meaning, and you took the meaning below that. And so plunging right into that from the beginning, in my opinion, is not served very well by having the three of us here. Because the first thing is, what is the nature of Terrence's ideas? I don't think Neil actually understood some of your ideas, to be entirely honest.
No, and what he forgot is when I say 1 × 1 = 2, that's a metaphor for challenging the status quo. Despite the fact that the square root of 2 has all of its issues when you cube it or you multiply it by 2, which creates a contradiction, despite the fact that the square root of 2 has a problem with the prime numbers, the fact that they call number 2 a prime number, when it's clearly a composite number. Any other prime number, and I'll jump into this, any prime number that you subtract from another prime number, you always get a composite number, except with the situation of the number 2. And there's so many people and that's why the prime numbers are unpredictable, because of that problem associated. So there's been a problem with 2 for so long.
2 is different. I mean, you will find that mathematicians will often talk about proving something for characteristic not equal to 2. So they'll single out 2 as being just very, very different. So look that up when we're done.
Yeah, but why? But why would they do
because
that?
in part of what you're saying, the prime 2, it does belong as a prime, but it is also special. And in other words, I have the opportunity to straw man you if I want to, because what you just said sounded crazy. And I also have the possibility to steel man you. So all the algebraic topologists who just heard, for characteristic not equals to 2, they're like saying, yeah, that's fair. And so in part, by just jumping into the middle of this, we don't have the benefit of putting your best foot forward, because, if you say 1 × 1 = 2, everybody knows that that's crazy. But what you actually may mean, and the fact that you don't use certain terms, or the fact that you use certain pronunciations that communicate to me something very positive, which is that you taught yourself. You learned this stuff from reading about it, because nobody taught you, or you wouldn't pronounce certain words the way you pronounce them.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So, in part, you always have the ability to make fun of somebody who pronounces a word the way it's read on the page, and then you also have the opportunity to say, holy cow, that guy actually taught himself. That's more impressive. And
Right.
so in part, what I want to do is I want to start by giving you your best foot forward and see if I even understood what you said when you went into this whole flower of life riff that becomes your larger theory. And the only way I know how to do this is to see whether or not I actually grasped it. Because, I also had to spend some time. I didn't spend a ton of time, but, my time is valuable. Your time is valuable. So let's do this thing.
Yeah, so I'll follow your lead.
All right.
What's going on with the number 2? I'm
The
sitting over here going,
CIA
hey,
is in charge of the
what's up with 2?
2 is different because of what he said.
Right.
The fact that the even odd distinction.
Isn't that odd, though? That 2 is different? What a strange thing.
The problem that's associated with the number 2 is because of the identity principle, which I call the Jim Crow laws of mathematics. That A times 1 equals. I know you don't want to go into it yet.
No. Let's get into it.
Just as a base.
You're going right into his neighborhood.
Just as a
You're
base.
in the mathematical hood right now.
Trying to keep the black man down.
No, you have Marie von Franz, who argued about the problems associated with the identity principle. You got Kurt Gödel, who talked about it. You got Wells. All of them said it made everything incommensurable just because they gave that identity principle to the number 1, and that has been the stumbling block for mathematicians because it's what's held everybody behind because they keep trying to make that work. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're wrong if we do it that way. In other words, I can take. What
is anything that he's saying correct?
Terrence has several influences, which again I don't think it's clear to me. I have to ask him questions to find out whether I'm even right. Look, one of the problems is I may be wrong about my model of Terrence. This is the first time I'm meeting him. I didn't know who he was before the podcast, and I need to know whether or not I'm even building the right model of Terrence, because otherwise it's just silly to have me here and I'm going to critique what I built in my own mind from Terrence's words.
Right.
What I was hoping is that you would be able to explain your geometric unity model.
That's a different day. This is about you.
Okay, then all right, then.
But you guys could definitely get it. That could be a whole nother podcast. But what about what he was saying is incorrect just now?
He's saying things that are often at a level that are allegorical, and you could make them. So Terrence sometimes mentions something called category theory, right? And there's a weird way in which category theory can take something that seems to be an analogy and make it precise and powerful, right? So you can have 2 systems that don't look the same, and you spot an analogy between them, and then you say, holy cow, there's an exact mapping of one system onto another in which it was unexpected that those are the same structure. So for example, we're going to get into something about multiplication where Terrence has an issue with multiplication. But to the best of my knowledge, you don't have an issue with addition.
I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with multiplication either.
Well, then 1 times 1 is what?
1 times 1 should equal 2. And action times an action. If you can show me one place in the universe.
But you just shifted frames.
No. Show me one place in the universe, one natural observable phenomenon where 1 times 1 equals 1, where an action times an action doesn't have a reaction.
So then you just went into there's a concept called logomachy, which is arguing over words. And what you want is not to be caught. If I can beat you in a word game, or you can beat me in a word game.
You can beat me in a word game. I didn't go to
You can beat me in a word
MIT.
game. By the way, I heard you with B.B. King, where he was having trouble improvising on the spot, and your mind just rescued him with a partial run. I really appreciate that because he's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he invited me to do a show.
That was
I got to play with him. Wow. I was scared to play guitar though with him. I should have put out the guitar, but I was scared. I was scared to get on the stage.
He was happy to have
B.B. King, man.
But I sang with him.
It's B.B.
Thank
King.
You for appreciating that.
Man, this conversation is very, very interesting. But here's the thing. This is what a lot of people are going to do, and I'm going to get into what they said and everything in a second. Destiny, if you don't know who Destiny is, look him up. Very leftist, very left-leaning, woke even, commentator, debater. More debates on things than he does commentate on things. He sat down with Jordan Peterson. Because he sat down with Jordan Peterson, it does not mean that now he is on par with Jordan Peterson, and it didn't legitimize him anymore. In fact, Jordan Peterson just dominated him throughout the whole debate. It was very, very nice to watch, but Jordan Peterson was also very charitable at the same time because he understood that he was sitting down with someone that was not prepared for a behemoth intellectually like Jordan Peterson. I would say the same thing now because I already know there are going to be people in the comments who are going to be like, he's with Eric Weinstein. That's it. He's a genius. Told you so. And that is not 100% true. Eric made it very clear. He's like, I didn't ask to be on this show. Joe, you asked me to be on this show. I've never heard of Terrence before. I'm coming here almost like a favor to Joe, and also wants to understand where this Terrence person is coming from with these large claims that he's making. So just to keep that in mind. Now, when it gets to Neil deGrasse Tyson, very interesting that Eric Weinstein was like, I don't even think Neil understood what you were saying completely. That is, that was a shot, unintentional shot, polite shot, but that was a shot nonetheless. Neil deGrasse Tyson's catching all sorts of strays recently, man. All sorts of strays. Ever since he went into gender ideology and all that stuff, he's been catching a lot of strays. Now, one thing that Neil doesn't do that Terrence is right about, he never addressed why Terrence didn't do the show within his reply. That reply that I was showing you at the beginning, Neil goes over a bunch of things that Terrence said, what he said, but he never goes over the fact of, I didn't have Terrence on my show afterwards because ABC, XYZ, no straight lines, 1 × 1 is 9. You know, he didn't go over any of it. He just kind of left it at that, said that we could sit down for a beer, which means, you know, don't call me, I'll call you, basically. And then I'll say straight up respect to Eric for stopping the whole attack. Now, I don't like Neil deGrasse Tyson's stance on a bunch of things that are outside of his realm. You know, the gender theory that he talks about, fluidity, that's a big one. That's the biggest one, in my opinion. I don't like him for that. I don't like what he stands for there. But respect to Eric for stopping the whole thing, because they could have really went on, and Terrence wanted to kind of rip into him a little bit, because for sure Terrence saw the reply. But respect to Eric for not only stopping it, but also not being afraid of Joe. Because a lot of people who come on that show, they're very scared of Joe Rogan. They're very intimidated by the whole thing. They know millions of people are watching. Eric, he's good friends with Joe. He's able to joke around with Joe, but also Joe respects him. So respect to Eric for actually stopping that whole thing. Also respect to Eric for being very honest about how scientists actually act. The way that they'll say, oh, it's all about, you know, open thinking, open source thinking, come and think with us. But in reality, it's like, slow your roll. You're Terrence Howard, or you're just random guy number 6. So you haven't gone to school. You have no peer-reviewed studies. You haven't been featured in the journal Nature. You quiet down. You know, that's really how it goes. And also there's a lot of financial incentive as well in terms of research and whatnot. So cool for him for being so honest about that. And then the fact that Terrence, little dishonest right here. Little dishonest in the sense of 1 × 1 is a metaphor. Now that's something that throughout the podcast they don't really touch on again. Terrence keeps talking about 1 × 1 being 2 as a fact. The fact that he now says it's just a metaphor is not what he's been saying for years. He has not once, in all of the years he's been making these videos and talking at Oxford and on the Joe Rogan Experience, he has not once said that that is just a metaphor. And now he's saying, when he's in front of a mathematician who's not playing around, who's very, very smart and is listening to every word Terrence has to say, now he's starting to call it a metaphor, and then moves back into the fact of, no, it's not a metaphor. It should be 2. So I find that very interesting. This podcast is very interesting. I'm on my second listen. I know it's 4 hours, but I listen to things 3 times speed sometimes. And then the fact that Terrence Howard is crazy, but for his theory of 1 × 1 is 2, and then talking about 2 and how different 2 is. But then Eric Weinstein says, yes, 2 is actually special, but Terrence is also crazy. So Terrence is also on to something with the fact that he understands that 2 is very special, but Eric Weinstein is still calling him crazy. I find that very odd, you know? So it's a very interesting conversation, man. I'm loving the fact that Terrence Howard is on here again. I can't wait to see more. I've heard what Eric has to say already. A lot of understanding. Eric is understanding Terrence, and he's also correcting Terrence. And it's very hard. Terrence can't play the game that he said on Joe Rogan when, oh, your math doesn't check. This is what he did at school. the math doesn't check out here, so I'm leaving and I'm going to teach it to myself and I'll just do it myself. He can't do that in this scenario. He has somebody who's a mathematician who understands this on the highest of levels, and when he's wrong, he's explained why he's wrong, and there's not much he can do to push and tug that, which is good because it gives him an opportunity to learn. Now, there was a couple things that they mentioned that you may not understand. I know I didn't, so I'm going to put it in right now. What is the identity principle? What is that? I have no idea. Let's check that out. Oh, they don't even have it here. Interesting. Principle and identity objects. It just goes into code. What is really identity? I gotta expand this really quick. So I'm not even finding a definition on it, because that's all I'm looking for. I just found an LLC on it. Identity principle. Nothing's really popping up. I was hoping I would be able to give you guys some kind of something about it, but nothing there. Category theory. What is category theory? Let's go on to that. Category theories is a branch of mathematics that seek to generalize all of mathematics in terms of categories independent of what their objects and arrows represent. Okay. So that's the type of stuff they're getting into in this conversation. The fact that Terrence can keep up is amazing. I know there's going to be a lot of people. The first video I made about this, so many people were like, oh, you don't understand. And it's like, yeah, you do. You do. Random person on YouTube. You do understand Terrence through and through. Okay. Eric Weinstein on the highest levels understands things he doesn't even understand, and he's open to figuring things out. So I'm just saying, a lot of people jumped on the he's a genius train right away. I'm never jumping on that train. I already got fooled by Kanye. Now he's making an adult film company. I'm not falling for these celebrities anymore. I want to hear him out completely through this episode. I already listened to it once. Eric Weinstein. Again, it's not a debate. If it was, Eric Weinstein would win. But there are some things, the linchpin specifically, that Eric actually feels is correct. Now, Eric explains it a different way and then gets Terrence's explanation of why. But that's something that they're actually able to connect on and say that this makes sense. Now, I don't know if Eric believes that everything Terrence says it can do can be done, but in terms of just mathematics and the shapes of it and everything like that, what it all means, what it all equals, he is on point with that, which I will say straight up, as somebody who did not believe in Terrence fully, that's surprising. So we'll see. Again, like I said about Terrence the first time I made a video, he could end up like Graham Hancock, where first time out, he's crazy. Second time out, little more. And then 5 years from now, with the aid of Joe Rogan actually getting him in front of some really interesting, smart, open-minded people, he could completely change things. I mean, look at Graham Hancock now and look where he was 10 years ago. That was because Joe Rogan helped him out as best he could. So if that same thing happens with Terrence Howard and we're all in flying cars because of Terrence Howard, well, that's it. What can I do? I'm just going to make my license plate because of Terry. That's going to be it. That's going to be my license plate forever. Anyways, guys, check out the episode. It's a long one, so I know a lot of people aren't going to watch it fully. I am going to, like I said, I'm on my second listen, just beginning. I'm going to listen to the whole thing. I'm going to make some more clips. You can come here for any updates. Other than that, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and I'm out.